The Pentagon Papers, a primer for Top Secret at New York Theater Workshop. In 1971, top-secret U.S. Defense Department documents landed on the front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post, exposing the government's role in deliberately escalating the Vietnam War. The stunning revelations highlighted the tension between the government's right to keep official secrets and the press's responsibility to keep the public informed on critical issues. The story begins on June 17, 1967. Secretary of Defense Robert S. McNamara commissioned an analytical history of U.S. decision-making in Vietnam. More than 30 researchers worked to create a 47-volume, 2 million-word, 7,000-page document that would become known as the Pentagon Papers. November 5, 1968, Richard Nixon was elected the 37th President of the United States. He promised that new leadership will end the war and win the peace in the Pacific. December 25, 1968. Daniel Ellsberg, a U.S. military analyst for the RAND Corporation and contributing author on the Pentagon Papers, spent 4 days with Henry Kissinger, Nixon's new national security advisor. Together, they reviewed future options for the war in Vietnam. Ellsberg's exposure to the Pentagon Papers had converted him from a Vietnam War supporter to an advocate of U.S. withdrawal. Ellsberg made this recommendation to withdraw to Kissinger, who failed to pass it on in his report to President Nixon. October 12, 1969, Ellsberg took matters into his own hands. He and several RAND colleagues made photocopies of the Pentagon Papers and wrote a letter to the Washington Post opposing Nixon's Vietnam policy. March 21, 1971, New York Times reporter Neil Sheehan met Daniel Ellsberg in Harvard Square. Ellsberg led him to an apartment where he gave Sheehan copies of the Pentagon Papers. June 13, 1971. Vietnam Archive Pentagon study traces 3 decades of growing U.S. involvement. The article revealed in detail how the U.S. had deliberately misled the American public about its activities and intentions in Vietnam. The government was quick to respond. The Manhattan Federal District Court issued a temporary restraining order barring further publication of the classified information. The Department of Justice announced that it would investigate criminal penalties in association with the leak. June 16, 1971. After the New York Times was silenced, Ben Bagdikian, an editor of the Washington Post and a former RAND employee, contacted Daniel Ellsberg and arranged to pick up a copy of the Pentagon Papers. The next day, Bagdikian and a team of reporters encamped at the home of Ben Bradley, the executive editor of the Post. They spent the day dissecting the contents of the papers and decided to publish an article as soon as possible. June 18, 1971. Documents revealed U.S. effort in '54 to delay Viet election. The Department of Justice immediately sought a restraining order and permanent injunction. This time, the district judge refused to grant the injunction and the government filed an instant appeal. June 25, 1971. With public pressure mounting and the government deadlocked with 2 of the largest newspapers in the United States, the Supreme Court agreed to immediately hear the cases of the New York Times and the Washington Post together. 5 days later, the issue was resolved. In a 6-3 vote, the Supreme Court upheld the rights of the 2 newspapers to publish the Pentagon Papers. All remaining restraining orders were dissolved. To see the drama unfold on stage, go see Top Secret, The Battle for the Pentagon Papers at New York Theater Workshop from February 24th to March 28th.